So if you're a little confused about what recovery speed or reactivity speed is on your metal detector, I'd like to talk about what it is, why it matters, and how it can help you in the field. So what is recovery speed? Well, when you're out there metal detecting, your metal detector needs a certain amount of time to detect the target, process that information, send it to you, and then reset for the next target. So you swing your coil over a target, your detector picks it up. If you're using a slow recovery speed, it's going to take more time to process that signal before it's going to reset for the next target. And on the other hand, if you swing over a target with a faster recovery speed, your detector is going to process that signal faster. It's going to take less time to process the signal to send you the information before it resets for the next target. So how does that affect the way you detect? Well, faster recovery speeds are good for trashy sites where you have a lot of targets in the ground, whether it be parks, home sites, or even some fields that have a lot of iron content. So if you're in these areas where there's a lot of targets and it's trashy, you most often want to use a higher recovery speed so that you have a better chance of that detector analyzing that signal and sending you the information and resetting for the next target faster. If you're using a slower recovery speed on sites like this, there's a chance that your detector might miss the next target. In other words, you swung over that target with a slow recovery, it sent you the information, but as you're swinging, it was analyzing that first target and didn't pick up the second target, if that makes sense. So there's a few things to keep in mind when it comes to recovery speed. And one thing is, if you're using a faster speed, sometimes you will sacrifice depth. Now, when I say sacrifice depth, it doesn't mean you still won't pick up targets that are 4 or 5 inches down. You can still do that with a faster speed. However, if you want to really try to pick up those faint signals into deeper targets, you may want to slow that reactivity or recovery speed down. So in a nutshell, to make this or to break it down as simple as possible, and the way that I see recovery speed and reactivity speed is when you're swinging your coil, you hit a target, detector processes it, gives you the info, and then resets for the next target. Now, if you're on a fast recovery speed and you have multiple targets in the ground, as you swing, it's going to do this process a lot faster. It's going to pick up that target, boom, here it is. Next one, boom, here it is. Next one, boom, here it is. So when you've got targets that are close together or in trashy sites, that faster recovery speed is going to help you identify more targets as you swing. Because remember, when you swing that coil, when you hit a target, you don't stop to let the detector process it. You're still in a swing and you're going to keep going. Now, with that being said, when I say you're not going to stop your swing, when I hear a really good target, I do stop and I'll swing back to that target, and then I focus on that target. So, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm just trying to explain, how your detector is seeing it. In this example, I've got an iron nail next to a penny. The X-Terra Elite recovery speed is on 1. Let's listen. So you predominantly get the iron tone, but you do hear the penny squeak through every now and then. Let's change the recovery speed to 3. Now swing across the target. We still hear iron grunt, but that penny's coming through a lot louder and clearer. Now I'm going to talk about some of the differences in between the detectors out there. Not every detector that you buy out there has an adjustable recovery speed. Some of them are set by the factory, and that's usually on the lower price machines. For example, an Ace, a Garrett Ace 200, for example, or a 250 is not going to have an adjustable recovery speed. Same thing with the MindLab Vanquish 340. Those recovery speeds are set and you cannot adjust those. And usually the manufacturer sets those somewhere in the middle. So it's a good middle ground for you to be able to detect targets. Now, with some of your higher end detectors, you're going to have a lot more adjustability with that recovery speed. For example, if you move up to a Nocta Legend, an XP Deus II, or a MindLab Manicore, those detectors give you much more adjustability when it comes to recovery. Just to give you an idea, if you look at the MindLab X-Terra Pro or the X-Terra Elite, those two detectors have a recovery speed setting from 1 to 3. If you move up to something like the Nocta Legend, then you're looking at a recovery speed setting of 1 to 10. So those higher end models are going to give you a lot more adjustability. And if you move up to an XP Deus II, for example, the XP Deus II gives you a little more fine adjustment. The reactivity, and on the XP Deus II, it's called reactivity. The reactivity speed on the Deus II can be adjusted from 0 in half increments. So you can go 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc., etc. So that's the difference in some of the detectors when it comes to recovery speed. So here's what I normally do and how I approach it with recovery speed. If I'm on a site that I don't know much about and it's kind of a mid-range site, I'm going to start in the middle of whatever range that detector gives me. I'm going to start in the middle and go from there. And if it's a trashy site like a park or it's an old home site, it's got a lot of iron there, a lot of just junk targets, it seems, then I'm going to go higher. I'm going to push that recovery speed higher or that reactivity higher so that I can separate those targets better. And if I'm on a site where it's very quiet, maybe I'm out in a field where there's not a lot of signals, then I'm going to lower that recovery speed because I might want to seek out some of those targets that might be deeper. So that's how I use it. All right, so I'd like to clear one thing up about recovery speed. Some people might get that confused with your swing speed. Now, recovery speed and swing speed are related. They go hand in hand. And that's something that you have to experiment with as a detectorist with your detector. You have to find that sweet spot of where whichever recovery speed you got set and your swing speed will match. So I encourage you to get out there and practice with your detector and try out different recovery speeds. Take known targets, toss them on the ground, play with those speeds and your swing speed, and you'll find that sweet spot for each one of those. So get out there and practice, and the recovery speed, if you use it correctly, then it's going to help you find targets a lot easier. And, of course, nothing's set in stone. Just because you bump it up to an 8 doesn't mean you're going to find every single target that's in the ground on a trashy side. It's not like that. Again, it all goes back to the practice. So, but just keep that in mind. And whichever detector you got, get out there and practice. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up now. And I just want everyone to know that I appreciate each and every one of my viewers, those that watch the videos. And if you comment, even better. So, and by the way, if drop in the comments whatever detector recovery speeds you might use for your detector and what situations you use them. And let's all learn together.